Welcome to the Gary DeMar Show, your 15 minutes of sanity each weekday. 4 out of 5 doctors surveyed recommend this show, along with a large dose of common sense to help combat the insanity served up by the mainstream media. And now, with today's daily recommended allowance of rationality, here's Gary DeMar.
Well, we are on our third installment of dealing with William Lane Craig's critique of preterism, and instead of rehearsing everything I've already discussed in the previous 2 segments, I want to finish up with this third one. There's much more I'd like to be able to talk about, but I don't want to beat this particular horse anymore. Again, I would like to sit down with Dr. Craig and discuss this either here or where he is. I've been trying to get a scholarly forum on this particular topic for quite some time. I've debated this topic around the country. I've debated Thomas Ice. I've debated Barry Horner. I debated Paige Patterson and others on this topic. It's getting harder and harder to find people to debate. I would prefer, though, and I've always tried to suggest that there be some sort of forum on this. I think that's a better way to go. We've already looked at the idea of perspective. That Dr. Craig says that it's the perspective of the person hearing this prophecy, and so if it's always a coming to, and again I don't disagree with that, but I believe that the more fundamental issue is the nature of the coming. We've already looked and saw that with Isaiah 19, Micah 1, Revelation chapter 2. Verse 5 and verse 16 in Revelation chapter 3, verse 3. We also saw that in the Olivet Discourse, the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great and glory is actually a quotation from Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. And that coming there is the coming up of the Son of Man to the Ancient of Days. It's not a coming down to earth. But even if it were, let's assume for a moment that this is a description of the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven to the earth. It's in the midst of this judgment upon Jerusalem, which Jesus talks about early in the chapter, where he says, not one stone here will be left upon another, it'll be the end of the age, etc. So even if that's the case, Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, and its parallel passages in Mark 13, is something that does not require a physical presence coming. And so what Dr. Craig, he goes on and he says this, he says, so in that light, when Jesus speaks again and again of the coming of the Son of Man, what that means is you're coming to where the observer is. I agree. It doesn't mean coming into some invisible heavenly throne room of God. There I disagree, because Daniel chapter 7, verse 13 is the Son of Man comes up to the throne of God and takes his seat at his Father's right hand. And he is there certainly at the time of the ascension. And I can't go into all the details of this, but I think that's exactly what we see with the ascension in Acts chapter 1, verse 11. Jesus is taken up into heaven, and he sits at his Father's right hand. He takes the throne of David, Acts chapter 2. We know that Stephen sees Jesus standing at the right hand of the Father. So that is, in fact, the ascension. And people see this at different times. And because Jesus continually quotes that passage dealing with the clouds of heaven and the Son of Man, he's always taking us back to Daniel 7:13. And probably related to this is Psalm 110, the most quoted Old Testament passage in the New Testament. So you have to understand the nature of this coming. It's not just the observational point as to where this coming is, but what is the nature of this coming? And when you look at Daniel chapter 7, you can see that this coming is up to the Ancient of Days. It's not a coming down to earth. Then he goes on, he says, so Jesus says that he will come again. That means he'll come to where you are, where the observer is. So I find it bizarre that these exegetes can take the coming of the Son of Man to be something other than coming to where we are. Again, not disputing that. The Isaiah 19, Micah 2, the Revelation passages, Jesus was going to come where they are, but these weren't physical comings. They were comings in judgment that showed the effect of this coming. That it means coming into some heavenly throne room that is invisible and unobservable by us. Now, then he goes on and he says, he turns us to Mark chapter 14, verses 61 and 62. And he says, look, when you get to Mark chapter 14, Jesus uses this language again, and he says this. And here he is before his accusers, and he is asked by the high priest, "Do you make no answer to what these men are testifying against you?" But Jesus kept silent and made no answer. Again the high priest was questioning him and saying to him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Now, Jesus doesn't answer it with yes or a no. He quotes a verse. He says, "I am, and you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." So his affirmative answer here is backed up with a verse. It's not just that, well, of course I am. He's saying, I am the blessed one. I am the Christ, and I am the Christ in terms of this particular passage, that you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Now, my question to Dr. Craig would be, when do they see this? Is this something they see at the end of history when everyone sees this, which the futurist position would say? When did these people see this? The audience reference here is that group of people at that particular period of time. Now, Matthew makes this a little bit clearer, because if you go to Matthew chapter 26, verse 64, Matthew adds a little more to this. It says, Jesus said to him, "You have said it yourself, nevertheless I tell you, hereafter, or from now on, you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." So this isn't something in the distant future that's going to take place. This is something that Jesus says, from now on, you shall see this happening. Now, I don't understand all of the implications of that, but I do know that Jesus was seeing that this was a present reality. And the high priest certainly understood it enough. And then the high priest tore his robe, saying, "He has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy." How did Jesus blaspheme? He blasphemed, according to their perspective, because he identified himself as the Son of Man of Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. And the high priest and those who were standing there would see this from now on. It's not just, well, you will see this someday. It is, the Greek is very clear. It's from now on. So again, Dr. Craig is not dealing with the full expression of this particular position. He is only dealing with a couple of things here and there. He needs to pull the whole context together in order to make these points. And so I believe that what you're seeing here is that the ascension takes place. And it's possible that the high priest, the Sanhedrin at the time, actually saw Jesus' ascension, that they did in fact see this. If Jesus ascends from the Mount of Olives, and this was a physical ascension, and there were clouds involved here, they could have seen this. And this isn't a coming to them, this is a coming to the Ancient of Days based upon Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. Now, again, this is an issue that has been discussed over and over and over again by the commentators. They understand the problems with these types of texts. I believe that the preterist interpretation of these texts give them the most complete and compelling answer. These are things that Dr. Craig does not deal with. The audience reference here and a couple of these passages dealing with the Old Testament in the book of Revelation, and what we find the high priest saying in Matthew chapter 26, verse 64. From now on, you shall see this taking place. And so what happens with the they of Matthew chapter 24, verse 30? And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Now, not in the sky, but the sign is that the Son of Man is in heaven. That's the sign, that he is enthroned. And then all the tribes of the land will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now, if you look at Revelation chapter 1, which is a passage that Dr. Craig does in fact quote, You can see here in verse 7, behold, Jesus is coming with the clouds, and every eye shall see him, even those who pierced him. So this seems to be an event that takes place where those people who were alive actually saw this take place, or they understood it. Sometimes the word see in Scripture refers to the idea of understood. We are left with a passage that if we let it speak for itself and giving the timing of events, because Revelation 1:1 and 1:3 tells us that these things must shortly take place, and verse 3 tells us for the time is near. John in verse 9 of Revelation chapter 1 says that he is their brother and fellow partaker in the tribulation and kingdom. This was something that was going on then and there. And the tribes of the land would in fact see this take place. They would see it in the way that the Egyptians saw Jehovah coming and judge them. They would see it like Israel and Judah saw the judgment coming of Jehovah in the book of Micah. They would see it like the churches in the book of Revelation would see the coming of Jesus. If he would remove their candle stand if in fact they did not repent. They would see this in some way. They would recognize that Jesus was the promised Messiah, something that they denied throughout his ministry. And not the whole nation, but the tribes of Israel would see it, they would understand it. They might see it sooner than later, as the high priest did. From hereafter isn't the best translation here. From now on you shall see this. You're going to understand this when the resurrection takes place, when I'm raised from the dead, when I ascend into heaven. You're going to understand it. You're going to see it. You're going to truly understand who I was. You're going to see those at the time of Pentecost that they would understand this. You would see that Stephen saw it when he was killed, and he saw the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Father. People see this at different times, and it's possible that the third person reference in Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, they finally see it with the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. This is a better exegetical possibility, I believe, than the futuristic perspective. You have to change the audience reference there. You have to deal with this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. This generation, every time it's used in the Gospels, always refers to the generation to whom Jesus is speaking. You have to deal with the idea of not one stone here will be left upon another. They will all be torn down. It's obvious here that at the end of the age is being referenced. These are discussions that have to be dealt with here, and so I believe that the preterist perspective has a better chance of dealing with the biblical arguments than the future perspective does. Again, there are some passages that I haven't figured out yet. I read as much as I can on this particular issue. But this is something that we as Christians have to do. We have to keep on doing. There are other things that Dr. Craig deals with here in this probably 3.5 transcription that I have. But if you want more information about this, what my perspective is, there are a couple of places that you can go. One of them is Last Days Madness. I deal with all of these issues in Last Days Madness. I deal with Matthew chapter 24 in a very complete way. I also have a short book called Is Jesus Coming Soon? And I also have a 70-some page outline on the Olivet Discourse, which deals with all of these issues in a much more comprehensive way. And you can get that by ordering a debate that I did with Barry Horner on this very topic. And so you will then get my kind of debate with Barry Horner, who's a futurist, on Matthew chapter 24. Those tapes, those CDs are available, and plus an outline, the 70-some page outline comes with it. Again, I appreciate Dr. Craig's gentlemanly and Christian-like way of dealing with this particular passage, and I hope he takes this exposition in the same spirit that he has given it.